All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Happy New Year to you folks. Actually, no, by the time this comes out, we would probably be about a month, 2 months in to the new year. But Happy New Year anyway to you guys. Hopefully, you're getting off to a great start. To my regular listeners, you guys already know how I get down, man. Whatever the challenge is, whatever the obstacle is, whatever it is you're going through that you feel like is in the way of your goals, we are here. This show has been here for the past 5 years to tell you you are not going through it, to indirectly tell you you're not going through it alone. Today, get ready, buckle up your chin straps, buckle up your seatbelts, buckle up wherever you're listening to, because you are getting ready to get a master class on why pressure really does not exist, a masterclass on why it's important to be very open-minded, why, you just can't predict the future. And the most important thing about life right now is exactly that, right now, focusing on the right now. I have Brian Hite, who I look at as kind of a renaissance man who's done it all, man, has something in him, and this comes through just through screen and through me listening to you, who no matter what happens to him in life, he's always going to take the positive angle. No matter what, it's a positive, it's a good thing, and it's something that was supposed to happen. I'm going to figure out how to turn this into a positive. So, Brian, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, as regular listeners know, they know as I'm as authentic as you can find on the internet when it comes to the show. And as I was listening to you, you mentioned going to school because you thought it was what you had to do. But you see a guy who's playing as Batman, who's a stuntman, and you're like enthralled with that moment. And then you start to live life on your own terms. So why don't we kind of just go back there a little bit and kind of speak about your background and some of the things that you saw coming up, and then we'll kind of go from there.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, my childhood was nothing to really talk about. It was just a regular middle class, I guess, childhood, I mean, we weren't rich, we weren't poor. I played sports, I went to school, public schools.
Now,
And
this wasn't
that's
in Jersey, right? You went to
no, no,
this.
no. This was well, I mean, I was born in Atlanta and lived there till I was 6, and then we moved to Oklahoma, and I lived there till I was 12 or 13. Then we moved to Nashville, which is where I say that I'm from, even though I didn't show up here until eighth grade, 13,
Right.
because this is where my family stayed. My dad is still here. My mom is just an hour and a half north or so where my sister is. So
Mhm.
this is Nashville is where I say and I say this because I'm back again. It's been via a circuitous route for sure
Right.
through like you said, New Jersey and then LA and then Washington State and then back to LA and then now back out to here.
Right.
So, but yeah, Nashville is where I say I'm originally from. Grew up here and I left. Yeah, I left after high school because going to college is that was the expectation. That's just, I mean, that's what you did. I didn't know what else there didn't even seem like there were other options
Exactly.
at the
Like,
time. It's just
that's what I said.
that's
The
what
concept of school really feels like a secure thing. That's what we feed to our kids every single day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with going to college right after high school. I think it's great for some people, but it's not great for other people. And I think I was probably one of them had I understood that there were other options available and maybe if I'd had the resources to take a year and just kind of hang out. And really, honestly, at that age, doesn't really require a whole lot of resources because, I don't know, at least the way that I was living when I was 18 and out of college. I mean, I was living in one room, sharing it with two other guys, and we had a little refrigerator. There was, and so you don't need much, but it gives
Yeah.
you some freedom to
I
to
was living a
really,
similar way, so I know exactly what
yeah,
you're saying.
yeah. So it gives you the freedom to just explore, and I think that's so important. It's so valuable, and for me, even if you're in college, that's still something to do. I think that's probably I
Mhm.
think there are two things, in my opinion, that college is best for. One is that exploration of subject matter. It's just you get to take classes in a lot of different things, and there are different groups and clubs and different activities that maybe you hadn't been exposed to in your bubble that you were in your high school. And the
Right.
other is just a different thinking style, a different way of thinking, a challenging of the status quo and assumptions, and really trying to get deeper into some of the material in ways that I don't think I wish that more high schools did.
Exactly.
So for me, college is valuable for that. But for me personally, I hated school. I hated school from the time I went to school. Like from when I was a kid, I used to make up whatever illness or injury would keep me from having to go to school. I hated it.
Mhm.
And there I was in college, and I hated that too. But at least had a little bit more freedom. And they didn't care so much about whether I went to class, which was great. but I
Right.
was floundering. I was uncomfortable. I was a little bit actually, at the time you're talking about when I when I saw this stunt show and decided to be a stunt man. I'd been in college for 2 years and had no idea what I wanted to be, where I was going to go, what my path was. And because I think I was raised in that way of, yeah, you go to high school, you go to college, you graduate from college, you get a job. Like that made me nervous that I didn't have an answer to the question, what am I going to do? Because I thought that's just that everybody knew that, or that's what we were supposed to know at any rate. And I was failing by not knowing.
Yeah.
So, cut to I'm in the Six Flags because I had a friend of mine that was the company manager of the Batman stunt show at the Six Flags in New Jersey, and I was going to college at Rutgers, which is why I was in New Jersey. And he got
Charlotte
us
Knights, baby.
he got us tickets to see this show, and I can't even describe, to be perfectly honest with you, the way that I felt and the immediacy of the feeling. I mean, it happened right away. As soon as that show started, there was an explosion that happened and motorcycles came jumping out, and it was a visceral kind of enthrallment. I was just captivated by what was happening in a way that I'd never been before. And I stayed that way for the 20 minutes of the show. And afterward, I could not wait to go back and talk to these people, which I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to do because my friend was the company manager. And they told me, what I needed to do in order to get the job. I asked them, how can I do this? And they said, well, you got to know how to do fights, high falls, and motorcycles. So one of them agreed to teach me fights and high falls, and I went and bought a dirt bike and taught myself that, went to the audition and got the job and did that the next summer. And that was it. My waffling around what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? All the anxiety around
Mhm.
what's my path? Where do I belong? Was gone. I for the first time, truly for the first time in my life, felt like I had a place where I did belong. I mean, I
Right.
spent most of my childhood not feeling that way at all. And I
Yes.
still feel that way a lot in adulthood too, in some situations. But at that particular point in my life,
Mhm.
it was a very new feeling of I belong here.
Yeah.
This is where I need to be.
Mhm.
And that changed everything. It changed my pursuit, what I was looking at in terms of stunts and where I was going to live and how I was going to move forward. And it and it changed the way that I approached college, which was, well, I don't need this anymore, so the hell with it. I'm not going to class, I'm not doing any of the work. And
Right.
I ended up dropping out of college the first time around to move to LA and be a stuntman.
Now, what you're describing though, in regards of feeling that feeling of not feeling like you belong, it's crazy to think about how much of a benefit it actually is in your adult years when you transition from, childhood type thinking where you just want to fit in. So now that thing that makes you unique, that thing that makes you different is actually being used to your benefit when you're moving into your adult years. So when it comes to being a stuntman and once you saw that moment and you're like, okay, this is what I want to do. And you mentioned them teaching you things. How exactly does a person do that? Like, do you get taught how to take a fall? I'm just like, what is the day
Yeah.
to day for someone? And you had kind of mentioned it's not something that provides a lot of income. You got to be very lucky to even be able to financially, support yourself when doing that. So kind of walk us through that transition.
Well, I mean, stuntman is a very lucrative job. You can actually make a ton of money doing it. It's just
Getting
uncertain as to
yeah,
when
sorry.
you're going to make it
Right.
or how, I mean, you just don't know. It's not like a regular job where every 2 weeks, however much money is going into your bank account.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, you might make $15,000 one month and make $2,000 the next month and
Right.
make 30 the next month. And I mean, it's all over the map. You just don't know, but you can make a bunch of money doing it.
Right.
But as far as training, I honestly, probably, I would say, this is just my guess, about 85% of stunt work is fights and just regular footfalls. Meaning, it's just a regular fight. You're doing a fight with somebody, getting punched, falling down. Or a footfall, meaning you get shot and you just have to fall down,
Hmm.
or an explosion goes off and you fall down, whatever it is. Like, just that's most of the work.
Right.
So when you're training, you just got to figure out how to do that in ways that look right. So the fight stuff, you need to get with some people who know how to fight. There are techniques for that, and it needs to be trained. Not
Hmm.
only the fight, the throwing of the punches, but the reactions, and not only the reactions to, for example, if you were to get punched in the face, just taking a face reaction, but a reaction to get knocked to the ground in some kind of believable but also cool way. So these are things you can train. And we went into the gymnastics places regularly and
Okay.
did that because there were mats all over the place.
Hmm.
The other stuff, I mean, there's some car work you can train, motorcycles you can train.
Hmm.
Uh, Honestly, the best training for any stunt person, there are two things that I would recommend, and they sort of go together. One is just regular air awareness. I mean, anything you can do to practice. I mean, just rolls on the ground, getting upside down, rolling on the ground, doing trampolines, doing some flips on trampoline,
Right.
uh, getting in some kind of wires or something if you can, but something that develops air awareness so that you know where your body is. Because things like, I mean, things like a car hit or getting hit by a car or or falling down stairs. These are things that you don't practice necessarily, and each time you do it, it's going to be different because the angle of the stairs is going to be different, the width of the stairs is going to be different, the way you get into it is going to be different. Same thing with car hits. I mean, you can plan how you hit the windshield, but after that you're just along for the ride and you just got to figure it out.
Figured
So
out.
air awareness is incredibly important, and then the second is flexibility. That's something that I think a lot of people miss. I know I did as a young athlete. I didn't stretch at all. I hated it. It was boring the crap out of me, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And I paid for it later. It wasn't until probably, I guess, my late 20s, I started to really recognize that flexibility was critical. And it's honestly, I mean, it truly, just last week, I would say that flexibility saved me on this job that I did. And I know for a fact there have been other ones before then where had I not been flexible, had I not trained, just, I mean, truly just stretched regularly,
Right.
I think I would have gotten hurt pretty badly.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad you mentioned being a former athlete because that's what this whole brand, that's what my background is in athletics and football and things like that. And the thing is, at some point, you decided you were going to go back to school. I want to make sure I'm clear and on the record saying that because at some point you decided to go back to school and you decided to get into sports psychology, which me personally, that's a topic for me that I could probably talk for hours about. But at a point, you started doing stuff with the military, and there was sort of a connection between sports psychology, military work, resilience, and dealing with pressure and all that. And what I'm curious to hear about, especially being someone now that's in a position to coach athletes, I'm out here in Florida. I moved to Florida because of the fitness and the athletics and me being able to be someone that mentors a lot of these young high school athletes. What exactly were you able to what kind of connections and what kind of things were you able to draw upon when it comes to teaching people that have a military or like currently are in the military? How were you able to get them to see some of the positives of what they were doing, their mindset, and just being able to go out there and do something and not feel I guess the not feel this weight that they normally have, whether you're actually a player or you're actually in the military. There's sort of a weight that you walk around with that you got to do certain things a certain way. What kinds of things were you able to do for them when you were kind of counseling them?
Well, there are a lot of different things. I'd say, just to back up a little bit, yeah, I ended up finishing my bachelor's probably about 4 or 5 years after moving to LA to do stunts, and that was just because I just wanted to finish it. And then
Mm-hmm.
while I was out there training as a stuntman, I was also coaching gymnastics on the side, and it was through that I was introduced to sports psychology. Now, I had majored in
Oh,
I
no.
majored in psychology in college,
Oh,
but sports psychology wasn't a thing that I took. It wasn't a thing that I really was aware of. It wasn't until I was coaching these kids and I was just faced with the craziness of practicing with them 3 times a week, 4 hours a day. And I knew really well what they were capable of and what they weren't. And then I took them to meets and I didn't even recognize them sometimes. I mean, the ones who were, lazy, lackadaisical at practice would come out and just kill it. And then other ones who were knocking it out at practice would come out and just fall on every event.
oh,
And
wow.
so the only
That's
thing in my
crazy. Yeah, I
mind.
didn't know that. I listened to this. I didn't realize it was because you're coaching a gymnastics team.
Yeah. And it was just something where there was no other answer. There's no other explanation that made sense other than just the mind. There was something going on mentally that was getting in the way of these kids being able to perform like they were at practice. And I mean, on the flip side, there was
Yeah.
something getting in the way at practice with these kids' minds to keep them from being as engaged as they probably need to be. I mean, they were doing well at the meets, but how much better might they have done had they actually gotten out of practice what they should have gotten out of practice? So it
Sure.
really brought me into the sports psychology realm, and I started reading a lot about it, and then decided to move forward with a master's degree in that, and I did, and then got that, and then wasn't done learning yet, so I continued on with a PhD in organizational psychology, which is essentially sport and performance psychology applied to organizations. Just, how do you create conditions that
Right.
allow people to be at their best most often?
But I have to applaud you there because we've come full circle, folks. All right. And I want to make sure again, this is important to mention that he just told you he was bored in school. He just told you he hated school. He just told you at one point, school wasn't him. And now to listen to him now, when you found the thing that you personally are interested in, now you just can't stop learning. The learning aspect is never going to end, but you have to actually want to be there for a specific thing and be willing to learn that specific thing. You can't just go because it's just going to be a waste of money. So I had to make sure we pause there so people understand that as well.
Yeah, that's an important point, and it's something that I wish that schools did more of really
Yeah.
connecting kids' natural interests to the material. I think that some schools do a better job than others. Some It's certainly out there. It's certainly not news to the
Mhm.
educational community that that's something that would be beneficial, particularly from a motivational standpoint, which is how you just brought it up.
Exactly.
Just and this is something that I talk about with clients and at organizations too. Motivation is one of you mentioned the military. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Pretty much every class that I would teach,
Mhm.
I would ask the leaders in that class, what is the biggest challenge that you face?
Mhm.
And inevitably, motivation would be one of the ones that comes up. And then it's like, how do I get my guys to do what I need them to do, to move forward, to engage without me having to make them, without me having to poke and prod?
Hmm.
And so much so that there wasn't one at the time. I developed one. I've developed a class on motivation that I could offer for these guys, not
Mhm.
only for themselves but for their soldiers. So there were two different levels. There was leadership, what do you need to know in terms of creating a climate that fosters motivation? And then number two, on an individual level, what are the things that influence our levels of motivation? And why does the source of motivation matter? Like you mentioned one, like learning this internal thing, this thing that's tied to me and how I see myself and the values that I hold. When that is the source of motivation, man, we can lean in and we can sustain high levels of engagement for a very long time with excellent performance. But when the sources of motivation are more external to ourselves, in other words, I'm just doing this thing to get a cookie
To get
or
the
to avoid, whatever kind of punishment it is that might be out there, well, that's different. And now, yes, it is a source of motivation. Yes, I might put in however, and this is the key, just enough energy
Mhm.
to get whatever it is that you're offering me or avoid what you're not. And that's something a lot of people don't think about, the fact that rewards can actually limit performance in that way, in that people will do just enough to get the reward, and that's it. They may be capable of more and probably are,
Mhm.
but they're going to do just enough to get that reward.
Right.
So the source of motivation, really understanding why people are doing what they're doing is critical. And you're absolutely right. Nobody connected any kind of why to school to
Right.
me. It was just this is what you do. This is your job. You go here every day and then you get the good grades. And that's what it is. There was no why. There was nothing, no even attempt to say, Brian, what do you care about? What's cool to you? What are the things that you enjoy? And let's try to attach this division of fractions to that, or this
Quadratic
concept of
equations.
social studies to that, or whatever it is. So you're absolutely right. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a critical point. And for me, it hasn't stopped because I did find that thing that I really enjoy. And it's expanded even because through that pursuit of sports psychology, I started to recognize that studying and learning about high level performance and the things that influence it is really important to me. And then I started to realize, well, some of those things that influence high level performance aren't just, what we think. It's really a broader context than that. I mean, what culture are we in? What types of values do we hold? Where are those things coming from? How do we deal with other people? So it's a bigger piece than that. And so that led me into more of a philosophical realm. And that took me back 2,000 years. And then that connected me back to the psychology that I was reading about in journals, which was uh, fantastic to me. I mean, the Stoic philosophers, if you were to read them, they read just like cognitive psychologists today.
Yes.
So for me, yes, you're absolutely right. I found that interest, I found that passion, the thing that I enjoy learning about, and then through that thing, there were other little pathways too that took me to other learning opportunities that were also things I was interested in,
Mhm.
and the floodgates opened, and they're still they're still going.
Yeah, it's so interesting too because the thing is, when you're talking about being that age, very impressionable, young 20-year-olds, again, I went to two different schools, and some of their biggest nightmares is being single, being alone, hating their job, not being able to provide for their families because they're walking into a world that they just don't know. And you've lived probably through some of the biggest fears of a person, which is divorce. You lived through it twice. And as I listen to you talk about it, you have absolutely no resentment at all. You've moved on and you've looked at it as something that's positive. And I think that's important to mention because when you're talking to your clients about getting rid of pressure, you're talking about changing their mindset and focusing on a certain outcome. So I'll let you kind of tell it a little bit when it comes to your philosophy and the kind of the journey you take people on when they think about, hey, is this if I don't make this shot, we'll even put it in a real example. If you're at a free throw line and the game's on the line and you miss it, if you're thinking too much about the outcome, and you'll probably not like what happens next. You use the example of the soccer player and stuff like that. So I'll let you kind of describe it a little bit.
Yeah. So there are a couple things that I think are really important to mention. Some people are under the impression that stress and pressure are actually they can be beneficial things with regard to performance. And I will argue that they can be, but only indirectly, and that they're certainly not the best way. And here's what I mean by that. Stress, by definition, this is the transactional model of stress by theorist Lazarus for any research geeks out there like myself. But essentially, stress is two things. One is we perceive a threat. That's the first part. We have to perceive that there's something wrong, something bad could happen. And the second part of stress is we don't believe that we have the resources necessary to deal with that threat effectively. That creates stress. So if we don't perceive something as a threat, there is no stress. If we perceive it as a threat, but we feel like we can handle it, we're good, then stress is that's not there either. Stress is the result of us feeling like we have insufficient resources to handle what's in front of us. So that's stress. That's never a good thing. If you're going into a situation and you're thinking, I don't have what it takes to get this thing done, that's incredibly anxiety provoking. That's where stress is.
Hmm.
Now, what stress also does is it activates the sympathetic nervous system, which boosts various chemicals in our brains and gives us a hit of energy. That's what it does. And so, in other words, it increases arousal levels. Now, arousal levels are that's our physiological and cognitive awakeness, really, is what it is. It's our level of pumped upness. That's what arousal is. So if we perceive something as a threat and we don't think we have the resources to handle it, that creates that sympathetic nervous system activation, which enhances arousal. Which now increased arousal is important for performance. There is an ideal amount of energy activation for any given performance for any given person. Meaning that at that free throw line, if you're there, there's a certain amount of pumped upness that you need in order to perform well. There's a certain amount of pumped upness that I would need in order to perform well. And those don't need to be the same, but for each of us, there's an ideal energy activation level. Well, that sympathetic nervous system hit that comes from stress can boost arousal levels to a place where it's easier for us to perform. That's why I say that there can indirectly, through this effect on arousal, be some benefits, but it's not because of stress that we do better. And pressure is the same thing. Pressure is different from stress though, and it's usually conflated. They're often used in the same terminology, but it's different in the sense that pressure comes from our perceptions of the consequences, how big the consequences are, the stakes that are involved. Like so,
Yeah.
you're talking about being at the line and shooting, and the consequences of missing are, our team's knocked out of this huge tournament and the season's over, or we go on to win the championship. Like the stakes are high. But that has nothing to do with the resources that I feel I have in that moment. So the stress in that situation might be I don't know that I have very good fine motor skills at this point in the game because I'm
Or would
tired.
it be like
I don't,
maybe your wrist hurts or something like
yeah,
that?
or you've had an injury or something. So I don't think I have that. So I may have a lot of stress.
Hmm.
Whereas the pressure would come if I'm focused instead on the consequences.
Yes, a few
So
minutes.
that's not good either for a couple of reasons.
Hmm.
One is if I'm focusing on the consequences, particularly bad consequences, that's what
Yeah,
people
that's actually
typically
what I was going
mean.
to ask you. Like when you say consequences, consequences can be good or bad. And I think too,
Yes,
even if you're thinking about, oh, if I make it, oh, the whole crowd's going to be cheering for me. If that's your motivation, that's also just as bad as you thinking about if I miss it, oh, everyone's going to hate me. So just think about the consequences in general is just a bad thing.
it's yeah, absolutely. And most people don't think of it that way because
Right.
most people will consider pressure. Yeah, I've got if I don't do this thing right, really bad things are going to happen. And I'll get to that more in just a second, but let's assume for the sake of argument right now that you're absolutely right. If you do this thing badly, really bad things will happen.
Hmm.
If your attention's on that, that's going to create a whole lot of pressure, which isn't good because that's going to screw up your cognitive processing. It's going to, again, kick that sympathetic nervous system into gear, probably past your ideal arousal level.
Yes.
But most importantly, your attention is now on the consequence and not on the actions you need to take in this present moment that create the conditions for success to occur. In other words, in the example you gave, success is me throwing the basketball through the hoop. Well, certain things need to happen for me to do that. I have to put my attention on the basket. My body has to be a certain level of loose. I have to have certain technique, different things with all of that is task relevant, immediate, in the moment, right now stuff that I need to do. But if I'm busy thinking about the outcome, more specifically, the consequence of the outcome,
Mhm.
well, now my attention's in the wrong spot. I'm not attending to what I should be. And
Yeah.
that is truly the only thing that we can affect.
Hmm.
The future, that consequence that we're thinking about will be determined by my actions in this moment.
Right.
So my attention needs to be on the actions in this moment. And here's the thing for any of your audience who's ever performed, I swear, if they've ever been in a moment where they've really felt it, where they've been whatever you want to call it, the zone,
Hmm.
flow, I just think of it as my bubble, but whatever it is for them, if they've ever been there,
Right.
they know their pressure can't live there. Pressure does not live there.
Mhm.
That's a place of peace and it's not calmness, it's not relaxedness, it's not that. That's not the right way of thinking about it. But it's a peace, it's a serenity, it's a sense of rightness where everything's just happening. There is no sense of pressure at all because we're completely in the moment and we're completely functioning to the best of our abilities. And so that's why I say that both stress and pressure, there is no goodness to them when it comes to performance.
Yeah.
There are other ways to boost that arousal level. Understanding that our arousal needs to be at a certain place, that our energy activation needs to be at a certain place for a performance is essential. Knowing what that place is, that is also essential. And
Right.
having some strategies to get there and stay there, that's essential as well. But we can't rely on stress and pressure to do that because along with the stress and pressure come that anxiety and the attention going to the wrong things.
Right.
So it gets in the way of performance. So
Yes.
yeah, my case when I'm working with high stakes, high level performers, I try to help them understand that right off the bat. Stress, bad, means you don't think you have the resources and you need to know that you have the resources.
Hmm.
Pressure, bad, because you're focused on consequences that are imaginary. They're not even real, but they're becoming real to you in your mind and they're creating all this angst and anxiety and keeping your attention in the wrong place. Where it needs to be right now is in the present. So
Yeah.
those are the messages that I try to get
It's
across.
interesting because and I've said this in the past, but I always give credit to Dre. Shout out to Dre for listening. He's someone I hired as a business coach, former pro basketball player, and he would always say, "No one actually rises to the occasion. You just fall to your level of preparation." And what you're discussing is not obviously it's not something that's just going to happen overnight. You need to be in a certain state every single day. And you coaches, you leaders out there, the ones who are just blasting this. Oh, this person is just great under pressure, and this one is just awesome. This stress level they don't mention. You got to block out a lot of noise and focus on just getting this one thing done. But if you go too far down the consequences, you will lose. I always use the example, Brian, of LeBron James down. They were down, what, 2-3 going to Boston. And I'm a big Miami Heat fan. And he said before that, the scoreboard's just going to take care of itself. I'm just going to go out there and be LeBron James,
Yeah.
45 points. He takes his team back to Miami. All of this stuff is applicable, and it's something that you have to be practicing every single day on just how you operate. How much do you really focus on the now, the right now? This is actually why I started today's episode saying the right now is the most important thing that you can have in your life. I know we're in the holiday season, there's Christmas, there's New Year's, it's all sorts of things that are here to distract you. But the right now is going to be the most important situation for you at this moment. So all that being said, I do want to give you the opportunity as well, because you have books out, you have courses out, and kind of give you the opportunity now to put a little bit of that stuff out there. I know you're working on a ton of different projects right now. So, what is next? What do what's what's the next phase of business? I believe, did you go back to doing stuntman work as well? So,
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I never stopped doing
yeah,
stunts. That's even when I was working for the Army, I would still take
right. So
jobs. I
you
was
were still able
working
to do it, right?
yeah, I was working up at what was it? It was Fort Lewis up in Washington, and while I was working up there, they were shooting the Twilight movies up
Oh,
there.
no
So I
kidding.
worked on one of those. They shot a TV show called Banshee up there. There was another. So I worked on some stuff even while I was
I've seen the Twilight movie.
doing the Army one. Yeah, well then and the last one where I was doubling Michael Sheen as the lead vampire guy. That one was we shot that one in Baton Rouge or Shreveport. I can't remember. I think it was Baton Rouge is where we were in
Oh,
Louisiana
nice.
to shoot that one.
Yeah, I would
But
say,
yeah, no,
actually, now that I'm thinking, I never met a like actual stuntman. I'm thinking now that would be a perfect situation. When I first saw it, I'm like, wait, he got through how the hell did he do that? Anyway.
yeah, it's I don't know. It's something that I really love. It's my tribe. It's my people. It's 30 years I've been doing it, and I feel incredibly comfortable on set, and I love doing the stuff. I mean, last week I was out on a show called The Cleaning Lady. It's a Fox TV show. They're in season 4 now, and I was playing Assassin number 1. I always have numbers after my like Thug 2 or Officer 8 or whatever it is. But I was Assassin number 1, and I was up on this boat and we were doing a little fight, and the guy knocked me off of this sailboat. It was on a trailer. Knocked me off the sailboat. I clipped the picnic table, went to the ground, and it was just so much fun. Just being able to be there with the other stunt guys, with the crew. Lou Diamond Phillips was directing it, which he's awesome. I mean, it was just so much fun just being there. And it's something I will continue to do for as long as people continue to hire me. I'm gonna continue to do it
As long as you can do it,
because I just love it. But
right.
yeah, on the other side of that is this business that I have, and it's I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about some of the things that we do because finally this stuff has come together. The stunts and the sports psychology has melded together synergistically into these offerings. And by that I mean, you were talking about the stakes and LeBron James and what he had with the basketball games. I've been in situations truly where if you do it wrong, you or somebody else around you is not going to go home, at least in the same condition you showed up in. And that's the goal. That's always the goal. So
Yes.
I understand high stakes situations. Last week was one of them, falling 10 feet off the thing. Like it's stuff that I am comfortable with and have a lot of experience with, and to be able to take the academic side with the sports psychology and the experiential side of working with the soldiers who have also been in those situations where I mean truly
And you
it's
said
not
it, they
about
didn't
trophies and
go
medals, it's
home.
about yeah, just being able to
Lives
go
being
home
lost. Right.
in the
Lives
same
being lost.
condition that you came in. And so these high stakes situations, I will never argue that the stakes aren't high, although that is a perceptual thing too.
Yeah.
I mean, we can argue about the objective situation of how what dangers are there or what's at stake, but whether we actually care about it or not is up to us. But in general, we can all agree that some of the stakes are incredibly high, particularly in those situations where our physical well-being is at risk. And and it can just be so challenging for so many people to be able to bring their best in those moments consistently, not just hoping that they're able to bring it in those moments, but actually having a strategy for it.
Hmm.
And that's why, I'd say if anybody here is has ever struggled with stress and pressure related to performance or motivation, either as a leader or as just yourself trying to get yourself moving in the direction you want to go. And this might be with regard to performance and practice, etc., but it might be maybe you got hurt and you're trying to recover, you're trying to rehab injuries. That's not an easy situation either. But you've struggled with motivation, or maybe just performance situations sometimes seem overwhelming. There's just so much there. If that's you, please check out my website. It's brianhiteglobal.com, BrianHite global.com. And just look at some of the programs that I offer and see if anything resonates with you. And if it does, shoot me an email, brian@brianhiteglobal.com, or just schedule a discovery call right on the website. You can do that. And because I'd love to talk to you. I've been there with all three of those. I've felt overwhelmed. I've felt just a I don't know, 5G pull toward the earth of no motivation. I just couldn't get myself going. And I've felt incredible levels of pressure and stress related to doing things right or to performing in certain environments. And it's not fun. It is limiting. And it really, if you're in a situation where you really could be taking joy out of what you're doing, man, the stress and pressure, all of that stuff just sucks the joy right out. And that's not good. So if any of that it resonates with you, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about it, and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and even to kind of close out that point, there's Phil Jackson. We all know that name, Mr. 11 Rings. I remember him on an episode of Oprah, and she asked him about the amount of wins, and he said, "When you win, it's just such an end to it. It just finishes. You win a basketball game, it's like it's over. That's it. There's nothing more that happens after the win." And when he said that, it really resonated that you have to be moving in a direction where you're constantly in a flow and you're constantly making sure you're in a certain presence. You have a certain presence because the winning that the world perceives, the winning that people celebrate you from, it just ends. It just simply ends. That's it. All right, it just move on to the next phase. So, again, appreciate you coming on, man. I'm so looking forward to diving into your work. So the final thing I do, Brian, to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back to being that 18-year-old kid. You're in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and you go to a Six Flags. I want you to pretend that version of Brian has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
Mm. Well, I guess what I would say to that kid is two things. One, it's always going to change. Everything's going to change. Life is impermanence. The concept of impermanence that I've taken away from the Buddhist readings and stuff that I've done has really meant a lot to me. Just recognizing that life constantly changes. Tomorrow's going to be different from today, and today's different from yesterday. As much as they may seem similar, they're
Right,
different. We're different. And just really embracing that change, that nothing's permanent, no matter how good, no matter how bad, it's
right.
not permanent. It will change. And that's a big thing. The other is that it's okay to not know. Just say you don't know. And you'll be amazed at how much information comes at you and how many more things you'll be exposed to and how much stuff that you will encounter that will completely open your eyes and change your perspective on so many things. Just say you don't know. Say you don't. If somebody asks you something and you don't know, just say you don't know. If
Right.
you come up with questions in your own mind or even directions, should I do this? Should I do that? Say I don't know. And
Right.
then follow what comes. Just go searching for the information. The information may or may not be out there. It may not be a thing where there's an answer. It may be a thing where you just need to talk through some stuff. But just say I don't know. Just start there and be okay. Not only okay with that, but that's our human existence. Curiosity, I think, is one of the biggest assets of humanity. If
Yeah.
we can cultivate curiosity, man, we can lean into life and we can, like you said at the beginning, we can find the goodness in any situation, no matter how uncomfortable, how painful it might be right now. We can find goodness in it, particularly if we cultivate that curiosity. So that's what I would say. Is just look, just say I don't know and be ready for change and just not even ready for it. Just look forward to it. It's coming. It's
Exactly.
gonna happen.
That's
And just
right.
accept it as part of our life.
Yes, and if you're a first time listener to this show, the reason I close out the show with that question because if that's you in your situation right now, we're speaking directly to you. So all that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.